Hello, this is Lauren speaking, and welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the horoscope of Ghislaine Maxwell. We'll look at the horoscope. We'll also see what is currently going on with her, astrologically speaking, right now and into, let's say, the near future throughout 2026 in light of how this Epstein scandal has just erupted. Now, with recent events that have just occurred, the Deputy Attorney General has just questioned her for about 2 days within this past week that I'm recording this video, which is strange within itself. And apparently the House Oversight Committee chairman, or let's say the House Oversight Committee, has issued a subpoena for Maxwell for a deposition, which is going to occur in prison on August 11th, 2025. So it's all quite interesting when somebody has been convicted of being a sex offender, etc., with a sentence of 20 years in prison, why all of this would be going on. Of course, you can put two and two together and make your own speculations on why they want to talk to her. But the astrology is pretty fascinating how this is going to play out. So let's take a look at her birth chart. The birth data, which will be in the description below this video, comes from astro.com. The source of the information is rated AA, which means that the birth certificate, it comes from the birth certificate in hand. So we have a good birth time and birth date and place of birth. We'll leave it at that for now. I have done some research with some of her past events, and the horoscope does seem, and the birth time does seem to be quite accurate. Now, I want to talk about a few things in the natal chart before we get into the astrological activity, because it sort of tells us a lot. Now, keep in mind that it is the person that brings the horoscope to life and not the other way around. So, knowing what we know about her, we can see how the symbolism sort of corroborates her story. We could say, her life. Now, notice here that there are 3 personal planets in the 8th house. She has the Sun, Mercury, and Mars situated in the 8th house. Now, the 8th house has to do with a lot of different symbolism, but one of them, of course, is the value and worth of other people and their resources. So it can be resources and finances that come from a partner, or a partner's job, for example. But the other very fascinating thing about the 8th house is that it has to do with the value and significance that one gives to sex. It also tells us a lot about how a person feels when they're confronted with the worth and value of other people, and also how they might feel supported or not supported by others. It's important to see here that Mars is conjunct the Sun in the 8th house. And Mars can make one, with that, let's say, conjunction, Mars can make the person impulsive, aggressive, potentially competitive with others. And the other very interesting thing is that Mars is oriental in the horoscope. Now, what that means, an oriental planet, is that it is the last planet to rise just before the sun would rise on that day. So it would be situated like just to the right of the sun. That makes the planet oriental. Now, when Mars is oriental in a horoscope, there's an energy of promotion. The person needs to sort of toot their own horn in favor of their work situation. Advertising is very strong. Promoting one's own situation or promoting something that is part of the job, the need to promote a cause, either their own or others, and it signifies as well a high, let's say, energy, a high nervous orientation. So, we know that she's been convicted of being a recruiter and trainer of young girls to, let's say, satisfy the needs of others, we could say, with that 8th house. So it's quite interesting because as we get into the astrological activity, both the Sun and Mars are being aspected right now, and this can tell us a lot. Mars also happens to rule the 12th house in the horoscope, and the 12th house can do with many different things, but it can do with, let's say, hidden enemies, certainly imprisonment, self-undoing. That's just a few of the symbolism that I'm thinking about with Mars here. There's a lot of things running around in my head, but let's just leave it at that for now. Now, let's look at what's going on astrologically with her, because, again, she's going to be subpoenaed for a deposition on August 11th. And the first thing we see when we look at the solar arcs going on, which are sort of a background theme of development that's going on, that can kick in 6 to 12 months beforehand, and also about 3 to 6 months afterward. But this solar arc, we see that the solar arc Saturn has now come to square the Sun exact for August 23rd, 2025. The symbolism of having the solar arc Saturn, which happens to rule the 8th and 9th house in this particular horoscope, very interesting because it's tying in, let's say, sexual activities with the 9th house of law and order and legal cases. That symbolism of Saturn arcing to the Sun represents the sense of difficulty, depletion, confinement, a fear of loss, a sense of aloneness, and potential or possible grief. Now, of course, I think that we could all imagine that she might be fearing that her future or her situation could lead to the same thing that happened to Mr. Epstein. So it's obvious that there's some kind of heavy responsibility being put on her, Saturn Sun. I'm not going to speculate too much here, but we can imagine that could be asked to, what's the point of questioning her? Of course it is to perhaps cover or not speak about something that might have to do with Trump, so to make sure that he comes out looking good and that maybe other people, particularly possibly other people in the Democratic Party, are, indicted or she confesses to them being involved in these sexual crimes. That's just, one possibility here. Why would you need to question and have a deposition for someone who's already been convicted guilty of sex offenses? At any rate, here's what's interesting with the transits. So, again, back to the Sun and Mars. Well, she's currently under a transit of transiting Neptune square to Mars and square to the Sun. And the transit of Neptune square Mars started up in April, will retrograde in September this year, and it will finalize in February 2026, and then Neptune will go on to square the Sun, starting up around May of 2026, retrograde in September that year, and finalize in March of 2027. Now, a Neptune transit kicks in subtly 1 to 2 years beforehand with events leading up. So she's currently in the midst of the transiting Neptune square Mars. Now, what does that mean? Well, the chief danger of transiting Neptune square Mars is that it can set the person up for situations in which they could emerge as a loser, or someone else may set the person up in such a way that they are forced to act without knowing what is really going on, and therefore they would act ineffectively. You would not expect somebody to really have your back under that transit. And so you would need to be careful not to get involved with any dubious schemes. And you would certainly avoid anything that you would know to be corrupt or dishonest. Now, because you're probably going to lose out and you're going to lose face as well. So if she, for example, hypothetically, agrees to say certain things, and let's say she lies, and later it's found out that they were lies, well, that's lying under perjury. I mean, that's lying under, that's being, she's already been indicted twice for perjury. So that could really backfire in a big way. And her hopes, of course, are to be pardoned or to have her sentence, commuted. So she, under a Neptune transit to Mars, she could do some silly things, in order to, who knows what pressure is being put on her, et cetera, right? Now, that transiting Neptune, that's then going to go on and square the Sun. Well, this can be a period of confusion and uncertainty as to which direction, your life is headed in, for example. So things can be very unclear. It can be accompanied with depression. And remember, this transit's going to hit exact, let's say, in the first half of 2026. So, although, like I said before, she's certainly already feeling this transiting Neptune square Sun, which is, dubbed the ego wipeout transit. The ego will suffer some kind of disappointments and defeats due to circumstances in one's life that have become, we could say, overwhelming. So, one would be advised not to avoid any kind of risky or speculative ventures, because one is very likely to be swindled under this transit. So what could play out in this situation, I think, is that she could be promised certain things, promised, that her sentence would be reduced, promised that she will receive a pardon. But under that kind of a transit of Neptune to Mars and the Sun, I don't think there's any guarantees with that whatsoever. So I think that she's possibly being used here to get information and to make sure that nothing comes out that would make Trump not look good, okay? Now, one other thing I'll throw in here is that when we look at the last time transiting Neptune was in aspect to the Sun and Mars, it was semi-square, both Mars in 2005 and semi-square the Sun in 2006. And just a little research that I've done here pertaining to the year of 2006, under that Neptune semi-square Sun transit, is that she had claimed that she was a long-term employee of Epstein between 1998 until 2006, just managing his properties. Nothing to do with what she was actually doing, recruiting and training young girls. The other interesting thing about 2006 is that in one of the 3 lawsuits that were filed in 2019, quote-unquote Priscilla Doe, one of the victims, claimed that she was recruited in 2006 and trained by Maxwell on how to provide sexual services for Epstein. So, in 2006, that's what she was doing. she was involved in these kinds of activities. So we can't exactly assume that now with this transit of Neptune to Mars and the Sun, that she is going to speak honestly, that she's going to be telling the truth. So it seems to me that the whole thing is a bunch of smoke and mirrors, and whatever's going to come out of this, or whatever they're going to tell the public is going to come out of this, we don't really know what deals have been made with her, let's say, behind the scenes. But I would say, looking at the astrology, that I don't think in any way this is going to come out favorable for her, no matter, what she does. And I don't want to get too much into this, but, who knows under that Neptune square Sun transit, particularly in 2006, my eyeballs are going right to August, September of 2006, whether she's going to mysteriously take her life, mysteriously have something happen to her. The whole thing's not good for her. That's what I would say, looking over this. It's going to be very interesting to sort of follow this story, but not looking good for her, astrologically speaking. So just wanted to kind of throw that together. And it's always fascinating to study the astrology in these kinds of cases and with these kinds of people, we could say, public figures. And I'll kind of leave it at that. It is also interesting for those of you who study astrology, was that when she was arrested in 2020 and charged with these crimes, she was having her second Saturn return. And again, Saturn, the horoscope, I think the birth time is quite good because Saturn does rule the 8th house. So they were sexual offenses that she was being charged with. And Saturn rules the 9th house, which has to do with legalities. So it's, I guess Saturn, I guess you reap what you sow, and it is the planet of karma. So anyways, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for listening, liking, subscribing. If there's anything you need in terms of astrological services, you can find the information in the description below of how to contact me. And I'll see you on the next video. So thank you for listening. Bye-bye now.